Hello, everyone. Today I will be talking to Katie. Katie has a very deep interest in Buddhism and in exploring how the resources of spiritual visions can be employed or activated to generate peace in conflict zones in Southeast Asia in particular, and more generally in the world. So, Katie, can I begin by asking you to tell us in a few sentences the central theme, the central focus of your MPhil dissertation?
Yeah, thank you. So the central focus was on how Cambodian Buddhists contributed to peace building after the Khmer Rouge conflict, genocide in Cambodia. So I was looking at how typical models of peace building and the interventions of the United Nations, for example, failed to account properly for religion and the power it was having to contribute to peace in that situation.
That's a very good topic, yes. Now, let me begin with my three questions for you. When people hear the word divinity, they may be a bit puzzled or intrigued or perplexed because divinity is not a word we use in everyday English. So what do you think that word means, divinity?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question, and one that I feel like I came back to a lot over the course of my studies, like what is divinity, what is religion, and all of that defining, I think, continued. It didn't really get much easier throughout the course of my undergrad and MPhil. So maybe it's more how it changed for me. So I think when I arrived in the faculty, I would have said that divinity is something to believe in or something that is greater than yourself. Probably I would have thought of it as something to do with God. And then as I learned and understood more about theology itself as a discipline and the maybe bias it has towards certain ways of viewing the world. And also as I learned more about Buddhism and Islam and other philosophies, yeah, I think I would have started questioning the idea that that you believe in something, and that's what religion is. I think I would have changed to say that that belief is can be such a Christian or I don't know, Eurocentric way of seeing religion, and there is this practice and more ways of being as a religious person or a person of any kind of philosophy. So yeah, I would say that maybe more divinity now I think of as something greater, something, but not necessarily something to believe in. So it's complex. It's not really a clear answer, but I think that is maybe part of the point, that it's different in different contexts. Yeah.
So would you say that religion is not so much about three things or five things or 25 things to believe in and tick away, but it's also about certain things that you do, certain activities, certain ritual acts, if you want to use the term ritual, certain ritual activities you participate in search of what you want to believe in?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Thinking especially around Buddhists, for example, in Cambodia, given that's the context that I was doing my research on. I don't know how many Cambodian Buddhists would have a list of things to say, oh, I believe in this, and this is what divinity is, the Buddha, and I believe in, like, I'd say it's more in terms of the practices, the things that you do as a Cambodian Buddhist, and that way of being rather than believing.
Now, sometimes people feel, both inside the academy and outside the academy, that there is some kind of a disconnect between the academy and the wider world. Do you think that the study of religion can make a concrete difference to how we live our lives in the real world?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say the one thing I say to people, like when I talk about my studies and what I learned, that they learn that religion is important, and it's not, in my opinion, it's not going anywhere. It's like this whole thing of the myth of secularism and the impossibility of secularism, and how religion matters, in my opinion. It's like, yeah, it's everywhere. I think especially my experience of doing my MPhil and researching Cambodian Buddhists, that it was such a neglected part of the peace process. So I was looking at these like dominant models of peace building initiated by the United Nations in Cambodia in a very top-heavy kind of sense. So they had these courts, for example, and this long-term like international development kind of peace approach. But actually, what I found was that there were lots of Buddhists kind of contributing to their own version of peace building, finding ways to live in their communities, which had been so disrupted by the Khmer Rouge, and the communities had turned on one another, and then afterwards had to find a way to continue living. And especially in a context where religion, the Buddhist practice, had been almost completely destroyed by the Khmer Rouge, and to see records of how it was regenerated so quickly after the conflict, and how people seem to be having the Buddhist practice as a way to reconcile themselves to their communities, and also to the dead. I think that was one of the key focuses of my research, that Buddhism and religion, all those practices, making merit for the dead who had experienced this violent end to their lives, and in some cases people didn't know where their ancestors or their relatives were, which is very disruptive for the merit-making cycle within Cambodian religion. And so after the conflict, that making merit on behalf of the violent dead was, I found, really crucial to what we call like a everyday peace. This idea that there are levels of peace. It's not just the United Nations Tribunal or the groups of leaders around a table. Is what people, everyday people, normal people in communities do to reconcile themselves with the past and find ways to continue living in the future. And I think religion is a key part of that, and should be more involved between those different levels.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. So, if I understand you correctly, your research on Cambodia, you have found, or you have sensed, the presence of two distinct narratives. One is the narrative of peace building at the grassroots, which is partly shaped by Buddhist spiritual ideals. And the other is the, shall we say, top-down heavy narrative being imposed from New York by the UN, which is driven by, let's say, big money, and they want quantitative results in the next 3 days or 3 months. And you were trying to understand how peace is being generated from the space within these two narratives, the one at the grassroots and the one at the higher levels.
Yeah, and there is connection between the two. So key Buddhist leaders like Mahagosananda he was leading these like peace marches through conflict zones in Cambodia, really rooted in Buddhist principles, but also the United Nations was trying to get him on board and around tables to discuss this. So there's really interesting tensions in that example, actually, around some criticism of his approach as being passive, or him not making enough comments against the Khmer Rouge, because he had this philosophy of neutrality and forgiveness and communication with the Khmer Rouge, which I think really brings into fore that tension of a lack of understanding of Buddhism and of his approach. So I'd say, yeah, there were those levels, but they were also connected, and Buddhists were involved in the official peace building process as well as these grassroots approaches. And yeah, that is continuing even today, with some amazing peace building organizations operating in quite a structured way, but using Buddhist principles, as well as what I would call this everyday or like personal peace, which is the work of communities themselves to exist together and to make merit for the dead and remember this whole piece around memorialization of the conflict and how it's being remembered by subsequent generations of Cambodians and internationally who don't remember or don't know anything about that period of history.
And that brings me to the final question for today. The time you have spent in the faculty, I think it's roughly 4 years, how has it shaped or recalibrated your understanding of what it means to be human?
I think in a related way, it showed me that religion is, or whatever label we want to use, is so important as part of being human, and that it's even if you're maybe atheistic or agnostic about religion, that there's no escaping it. I think that's what I learned, that even all of the structures that we live under are so influenced by religion. So to give an example, I did my undergrad dissertation on dieting and diet culture in the UK and America, and how I was arguing that it was very shaped by Christian perceptions of the body and of fasting. And even that, like something you would think is so, has nothing to do with religion. Sometimes when you dig beneath the surface, you see that, especially in a British or American society, everything is, well, not really, but lots of things come back to Christianity and to religion. And I think has that relevance that that people don't really understand. So yeah, going back to the question, probably what it means to be human, I probably think now more than ever that that religion in whatever form is part of that, and that we're so, being human is to live within these structures and to try, and when you try and dismantle them, you realize how powerful it is, where you come from, and the beliefs and practices of that culture shaping your systems of thought. Yeah, how we kind of are embedded within those cultures, even if, like for me, I would probably have come into the faculty saying, oh, I don't believe in anything, or I have no religion, is not part of my life. Actually, I think it's taught me that it's kind of everywhere.
Thank you, Katie, for talking to me today. The next time you're in Cambridge, do let me know. We will have a cup of coffee, and we will look for religion in making that cup of coffee.
Yes, I'd like that.